Hi, I'm Paul Baxendale, and welcome to my weekly blog post number 12. This week we're going back to 1997 and to the amazing FIBO exhibition that's held in Essen, Germany every year. In 1997 I had been sponsored by Champion Nutrition to be their representative bodybuilder at their stand for the entire week at FIBO. They were a company that during the last year had supported nearly all of my supplement needs and support as I competed in the UK Championships and then at the Mr. Europe Championship in Bilbao, Spain. The show in Spain was particularly memorable as it was my first time competing abroad, and so I had a steep learning curve to pick up all the tricks and tips for making competing away from home a lot easier. Things like leave your tan until you get there. Make prepared meals and snacks that you're able to eat right up to the show, so you're not hunting around for meals in a strange country in a strange city or town, probably unable to speak the language, and have to eat food that isn't anything remotely similar to the local cuisine. Anyway, that trip can be covered in a future blog post. So let's get back to preparing for FIBO, as it was the biggest event of the calendar year in bodybuilding circles, apart from the Mr. Olympia and the Arnold Classic, as you had virtually all of the world's greatest bodybuilders, male and female, all in one exhibition, mainly in their off-season shape, and to get to mingle with them all, chat with them, get your photo taken with them, get their autographs. Plus, there are events on a stage all day, a huge gym full of new gym equipment, brand new to the market, and stands from all the major supplement companies in the world, giving away free samples and trying to persuade you to switch to their brand. Well, my 1997 competitive season was very successful for me, with a couple of major victories, and that can wait for another future blog post too. Because today I really wanted to focus entirely on this week-long festival and celebration of health and fitness that back then was almost entirely bodybuilding and fitness related, based with the bodybuilding stars as the big draw for the whole show. Each year, the Weider Group would send over a team of their top athletes. We had Vince Taylor, Flex Wheeler, Paul Dillett, Charles Claremont, Jean-Pierre Fuchs, Sharon Bruneau, Debbie Lee, Kim Chizevsky and Gunther Schlierkamp, amongst a host of other stars from the world of bodybuilding there all week. Now, FIBO was a hugely popular event in Europe, and people came from every country around Europe to go there, and some from even further afield, from Eastern Europe, America and Asia, to come and see the biggest and the best congregation of the world's bodybuilding and fitness stars live, to meet and greet and chat to and get a photo and autograph with. So, with a successful contest season behind me, Mike Zumpano of Champion Nutrition asked me if I would go to FIBO as their guest bodybuilder along with their UK distributor to represent the company for the week there. Wow, what an honour that was. It truly was. I felt that perhaps my hard work over all those years was beginning to be recognised, and that felt good. So I was excited to go, and as I got on really well with the UK distributor, then it was going to be a fun week. Or so I thought, and I was right. It was an absolute blast the whole week. And I can share most of the stories with you within reason, but others will have to remain a secret due to the delicate nature of the material and to protect various reputations, let's say. Only partly joking here. Seriously, it was my first exposure to one of these huge events from an athlete's perspective. And wow, was there some fun to be had if you wanted it. The only downside was firstly that my wife had given birth to our first baby the September before. So our first baby was less than a year old. However, I knew she was more than capable of looking after the little one while I was away for the week, so I knew that was going to be okay. And the second thing was, I was preparing for the World Championships. They were around 10 weeks away, so I would have to remain on my strict diet, training, food, recuperation, cardio, all the pre-contest things that are essential to preparation. Now, the year before, in 1996, I'd also gone away when I competed at the European Championships, not expecting to win or qualify for the World Championships, which I had in coming third. So I had booked a holiday for my wife as a secret gift to go to Prague for a week. And then I found out that I had qualified for the Worlds, and so I had to prepare for that show while going away for the week in Prague. But I found a great gym on the very first morning I got there, and also a restaurant that served me chicken and broccoli, and the waiter even asked me how many grams did I want. How great was that? They love bodybuilding in Prague. So I thought surely the world's biggest bodybuilding and fitness exhibition wouldn't present me with any problems to keep my prep on schedule. And it didn't, except for a few temptations, as I'll tell you shortly. Those German desserts are gorgeous. So the UK distributor and I, we drove through France, then across to Essen, where we'd arranged to meet up with the American contingent of Champion Nutrition at the hotel we would all be staying at. Luckily, it was right at the centre of the exhibition itself. We booked in, and then we had a short rest waiting for the American squad, and before long we got a call from reception to say that Mike had arrived at the hotel. Now, I'd come knowing I would need plenty of workout gear. Now, I wasn't knowing if I was going to be able to wash anything during the entire week, and I knew I would be doing 2 cardio sessions a day, plus training 4 days out of 6, and I never wanted to turn up on the stand in anything but nice, clean, fresh clothes to represent a company, but also to represent myself. Do now what nature demands of you. Get right to it if that's in your power. Don't look around to see if people will know about it. Don't await the perfection of Plato's Republic, but be satisfied with even the smallest step forward and regard the outcome as a small thing. Now, shortly after a short nap, we got the call from reception to let us know that Mike had arrived downstairs. So we went downstairs to meet him and the rest of the team, which was quite small. I was quite surprised. It consisted really of a couple of administration girls and Mike himself. So there was no other bodybuilder or fitness athletes from America from Champion. I was it. So no pressure on me then. It just meant that I had to man the stand all day, all week, to ensure that the customers got all their photographs and autographs and were able to chat with me on behalf of the company. It was going to be long days, or so I thought, but then Mike explained how the expo ran. It was only open to trade on Tuesday through to Thursday, and then from Friday through the weekend, that's when it was open to the general public, which was when it became really crazy and the crowds were absolutely monstrous. Still, I'd never been in a position where people had wanted my photo before, except from when I was on the beach at the Cannes Film Festival, when they thought that I was a film star or a professional athlete, not a bodybuilder though. So getting my photograph and my autograph, this was going to be a new experience for me. It was going to be fun, but strange at the same time. What I really wanted to know, though, was where was the nearest gym, because I needed to train. Now, Mike explained how the week was set up for us and what each of our roles were. He's a really friendly guy and a big man too, great guy. He obviously trained all his life and had done probably from a kid, you know. I knew Mike only from his name as the owner of Champion Nutrition, but I also knew that he co-authored the original Underground Steroid Handbook with Dan Duchesne. Now, Mike's name nearly always gets forgotten by people who always think of Dan when the book is mentioned. Now, Mike pulled me to one side in reception and then asked if I was competing shortly, as I was in pretty good nick. I told him I was preparing for the Worlds in about 8 weeks' time, at which he said to me that I needn't worry about a thing, as he would arrange for me to get to gyms whenever I needed to, and I could order whatever I wanted from room service anytime, night or day. I was shocked. I'd never been treated so well before in my life, and although I appreciated his offer greatly, I couldn't take advantage of his generosity like that, and I would only ever order room service food if I couldn't get anything else from anywhere else, from any supermarket or restaurant in the entire place. Now, so the entire city was geared up for this huge week-long exhibition of bodybuilding and fitness. It was just an incredible event and a sight to see back then. Now, Mike said he wanted to go to his room, but would it be okay if he came to my room afterwards, as he wanted to have a chat with me? I said, of course. And then he said, did I fancy training afterwards? Fantastic. That was a definite yes. And he said, great. And that he would join me for a workout, because he wanted to experience, because he'd heard how I trained and all the heavy duty workout. It was all new to him. So he wanted to know how I trained. And he had heard I'd also trained with Dorian in 92 and 93. So that intrigued him. And this new heavy duty, high intensity training style, that too, he'd never used it before. So we were going to be doing that. Now the week was just looking better and better from my perspective. So I waited in my room just for a few minutes when there was a knock on the door. It was Mike. Andy, the UK distributor, which was sharing a room with me all week, I think he kind of understood that Mike wanted some private time with me alone, so he made an excuse to go out, which was, very kind of him. Now Mike came in and he asked me how my prep was going, what I was eating, how much cardio I was doing. It was obvious he knew a lot about the intricacies of dieting and supplementation, so I listened very carefully, as this was going to be a very informative chat. He asked how I was going on a low carbohydrate diet, as he had used it himself and found it very useful in getting lean and maintaining muscle tissue, if your rest and supplementation was right. I said that it was the third time that I'd used a low carb ketogenic diet, and I found it was a great way to get lean, but I always found I was losing muscle tissue right at the very end of the prep, when the very last bits of body fat had to come off. I felt that my muscles were flattening out and just coming off a little bit, a couple of pounds here, a couple of pounds there. Now Mike suggested that I increase my intake of essential fatty acids more than the half a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil that I was taking with every meal back then, and to throw in a couple of good quality steak meals each week as well. Apart from that, he suggested a few supplemental options that I could consider, but said that I looked as I was on schedule, on track, and carrying a lot of muscle on my frame. You'll see from the photos of me at FIBO that are on the website that I was indeed carrying a fair amount of muscle on my 6'1" frame, and it was balanced out pretty symmetrically, but size was always what I needed on my body. My frame, being over 6 foot, was hard to fill out. Eventually I would compete at 117.8 kilograms at the Worlds in 2006, but that was a long way off from 1997. He then asked me about my anabolic protocol, so I explained what I was taking, and it was based roughly upon what Dorian had suggested to me back for the 1994 British finals. Mike thought the dosages were low, but that the products were fine. He then asked if I brought anything with me to Germany. I was a bit shocked at the question, but it was Mike Zumpano after all, so why should I be shocked? He'd co-authored the Underground Steroid Handbook with Dan Duchesne. So I said yes. I'd actually brought a few bits with me to keep my pre-World Championship cycle going while I was here. And then I decided to show him exactly the products that I had with me. Now obviously my UK distributor didn't know anything about me bringing anything with me, as he would have had kittens if he'd known and we'd been stopped and searched. In fact, as we rolled up at the customs point in Germany, he did say jokingly to me, "Now you haven't brought anything you shouldn't have, did you, Paul?" And I said, Of course not. Andy, I've just brought what I needed for the week. That's all. And it was true. I had just brought what I needed for the week. I just didn't tell him exactly what it was I needed. So I didn't lie to him. Anyway, we drove through customs without a hitch. And so there I was in my hotel room, looking at little ampules of anabolics with Mike Zampano, who was very, very impressed with what I had because it was all pharmaceutical quality from my French pharmacy contact in Cannes. He stood there looking with almost envy at the ampules, envy in his eyes. And then he asked if he could possibly take a couple of ampules with him. For what reason? I think I knew, but I wasn't going to embarrass him either. Heck, after all, he was a bodybuilder too, and he was sponsoring me, so the least I could do was to give him a few ampules of Parabolon and Primobolan Depot to look at during the week. I'm sure he wouldn't have used them or anything like that. Now, what a great guy Mike is, seriously. I would really love to get back in contact with him. He's been such a tremendous supporter of bodybuilding in general and loves this sport as much as anyone else ever has done. A true iron warrior and a great man. Very generous and honest man. I'd love to get back in touch with him. Won't you be walking in your predecessor's footsteps? I surely will use the older path. But if I find a shorter and smoother one, I'll blaze a trail there. The ones who pioneered these paths aren't our masters, but our guides. Truth stands open to everyone. It hasn't been monopolized. Seneca. So after impressing Mike with my supply of exotic supplements, and after he had checked my condition over, we headed for the nearest gym. Now, I had no idea where we were or where we were going, but Mike had it all planned out, as the organisers had apparently told the sponsors of the show where all the nearest gyms were for the athletes so they could train. And from Thursday, we were even welcome to train in the exhibition hall's gym itself, as it would be kind of part of the show for the spectators and the crowd and the fans to see us actually train. As it turned out, that was an experience in itself too. So we called a taxi to the gym and we were let in free of charge by the gym owner due to us being from the expo, as he wanted to try and get as many pro bodybuilders into his gym as possible for advertising for his gym. So we went onto the gym floor and we began to warm up. Now, I remember it was back day for me, and Mike said he was happy to follow my routine, especially as he had heard, obviously, that I trained with Dorian, so he really wanted to experience heavy-duty, high-intensity training himself. Now, when I say high-intensity, that isn't to say bodybuilders hadn't been training with high-intensity for years. Of course they had. Have you ever seen the clips of Tom Platz training legs? High intensity. But it was the concept of putting all your intensity into one working set that was so unique and radical about the protocol. It was a learned art though, as you almost had to at first persuade your brain that you weren't going to be doing 3 sets. So there was no reason for your mind or your body to hold anything in reserve. Now this took some adjustment and time and a few months of getting used to before you can honestly and truthfully put your every living fibre, your every muscle, sinew, energy, passion, commitment, life or death mentality into that one working set. So Mike was going to try it for the first time, and I was looking forward to showing him. Now, Mike wasn't a young guy, but he was obviously in great shape. And I was professionally coaching by then anyway, so I knew I had a close emotional tie to the trainee in terms of knowing how far I could push them, and in we went. We began by lat pull downs, a great warm-up movement for the heavy rowing movements to come. There was no Nautilus pullover machine there, so the lat pull down was a great alternative. Not in the same league as the Nautilus, but still a great alternative. You know, if they were good enough for Arnold, Serge, Nubret, Lou Ferrigno, and they were certainly good enough for me. I don't remember too much about the workout. It was many, many years ago now. But what I do remember is the barbell rows and how Mike, how he impressed me, how he automatically found that 70-degree angle, that angle where you're in perfect alignment to get maximum power through your lats and still put the stress on the lats at the same time. Now, by this time, I was doing barbell rows over hand grip, just like Dorian. We'd switched from using underhand grip when Dorian had torn his bicep in '94. So we switched to overhand. The rest of the workout is a bit of a blur to me now. I think there was mainly free weights though, maybe a couple of new machines, just to try out because we were there. Now, after the workout, Mike was exhausted and he was only too happy for me to go and do 30 minutes of cardio because I asked, would he mind? I just wanted to do some cardio after I finished training to get it done and out of the way for the day. So other pros were starting to come into the gym by now. In walked in Gunter, then Don Long came in, Paul Dillette came in, who I'd met once before when he'd come to Temple Gym, not to train, but just to hang out with us all, and then he was going to spend the rest of the day with Dorian. So it was full of pro bodybuilders and top amateurs, male and female, and already exchanges of hello and smiles were given all around, and there were plans to meet up all together, all of us, later on in the hotel. As it appeared, we were all staying in the same hotel for the week, so that was great. After my cardio, I was done, tired, but most of all, I was hungry. And Mike was too, luckily enough. So we both walked down the streets of Essen looking for a good restaurant where we could guarantee some good food that I would be able to eat. Now, it always seems to be the case that the more expensive restaurants are always willing to cater for your individual needs. I guess it's because you're paying that little bit extra. But we found a very traditional looking German restaurant and it looked beautiful outside. And inside it was all wooden paneling. It was all a bit like Temple Gym downstairs, except this place was carved wooden paneling and absolutely gorgeous. So we ordered steaks and vegetables. Perfect. Now, I don't know if Mike was taking my lead with the choice of the food, but we both had the same clean meal together. And although I was tempted looking at the dessert menu, at the list of the schnitzels and apple strudel and poppy seed strudel, with a bit of yearning, still only another 8 weeks or go, and then I'll be able to indulge in whatever food I wanted to eat. So after that, we headed back to the hotel and we met up with the rest of the team to arrange the meeting times for the morning and then headed to bed. My distributor buddy was out late that night, so I went to sleep, not even hearing him come in like early in the morning probably. I think he was there to enjoy himself for the entire week, and why not? You know, the team was filled with very attractive girls, so I don't blame him a bit for wanting to spend some time with them. The next morning, I got up early at 5 a.m. and did a 40-minute power walk around the streets of Essen. Now, power walking is a great way to see the sights of any city, as it gives you the time to really look and pick out all the details that you'd miss if you were in a car or a bus. Now, I used to do this wherever I was in the world, if I was on a business trip or even on holiday, as it not only gets your cardio out of the way and it keeps you in good nick and your cardio good, but it also allows you to see the city and the parts of the city you wouldn't normally see, wherever you are. And as I said, there's no better way of doing it than on foot. Now, back at the hotel, when I got back, Andy was still asleep. I took my opportunity to take one of my special supplements so he wouldn't know and get freaked out at the fact that we'd come through customs the day before with them in his car. Now, of course, if anything had happened, they'd been found, I would have owned up to it. Of course I would. So he didn't have to worry about anything personally, but I didn't want to worry him needlessly anyway. So I went down to the restaurant downstairs where they were serving breakfast, and I gave them the oats that I brought with me because I didn't know whether or not that the hotel would actually have oats for breakfast. So I brought them with me and I gave them a tub of oats and I asked them to weigh out 80 grams for me, which they kindly did. And they added hot water to them and I allowed the oats to cool a little and to get soft. I always did this as there was a lot of talk back then about protein degradation when heated. And so I ate it hopefully without degrading the protein in the process. I remember there was a lot of debate back then about whether protein degraded when it was heated or if it didn't, or if heat was added to it. Now I don't know the outcome of that debate, but I did know that Kerry Kayes and Paul Borison were always making sure that the protein they bought in for chemical warfare, whether it was micellar casein or whey hydrolysate or isolate or even concentrate, was cold filtered because of the damage done to the protein if it was heat processed. So I chose not to take any chances and eat it when it cooled down a bit. 80 grams of oats and 2 scoops of protein powder. That was my carb intake done for the entire day. So all I had to worry about was getting enough protein and essential fats and getting enough of them. Now at the time, I also took a multivitamin and mineral pack every morning. Now that was from Chemical Warfare 2. And before that, before Chemical would come out with the product, I used to use the Animal Pack product, which I think is still being sold. And I think it's got an anniversary this year. I think it could be a 30-year anniversary because I think that would be about right. Because I'm sure it was in the early 90s, 1991, would make sense. You see, good products always last. And another thing I remember about the Animal Pack was the photographer. Someone who I'm proud to say I'm still in contact with, Brian Moss, from Better Bodies fame and obviously his awesome photographic skills too. Brian is a great guy, tremendous guy. So hi Brian if you see this. Anyway, back to FIBO. I met the team at the allotted time in the morning and we all walked through to the exhibition centre together where our stand had been built in the hall right next to the main hall with the stage. So it was perfect. We were going to be able to see a lot of the shows that went on throughout most of the days when it was open to the public. We had a great stand. I remember thinking, wow, just how big the entire place was. And we were just in one of the halls of the expo. Now being right next to the stage hall was phenomenal. There wasn't a better place for a stand to be in the entire expo, I don't think. We helped set up all the products on the stand and we hung the Champion Nutrition banner across the booth and then set up a waist-high pillar where we placed product leaflets and brochures. And that was where I was going to stand all day so I could be easily accessible to the public, to the trade people, the gym owners, product distributors. And then when the general public came in, I was able to chat with them easily, have photos taken of me, sign autographs. I think this is a really good point at which to raise the question of pride, fame, and validation. You know, at the time, it was very much of a shock to me. I'd never experienced anything like it before. So I took it with a bit of a pinch of salt, thinking it was likely a one-off event. And to enjoy it, but not to get too full of myself, as it was probable that even if these people did want my photo or autograph, they almost certainly would never have known who I was. It was very like they were just taking photos of everyone they met there. Unless they happened to be British bodybuilding fans, and then maybe they might have known who I was. And thinking back, there were very few people from the UK there, apart from a few athletes. But looking back, I do think there is a place for accepting that when you have occasionally achieved really good things in life, then people acknowledging your work, it should be humbly but gratefully accepted and received, and to take it as just that, a recognition of your life's work, but never to let it become the reason why you do anything. In other words, don't ever get to the point of needing validation from anyone for what you do. What you do should be your life's mission, your deepest passion, the very reason you were put on this earth for. And that has nothing to do with anybody else, except that if you do your life's mission with passion, intensity and hard work, then hopefully others will be better off for you having been here. No one is crushed by fortune unless they are first deceived by her. Those who aren't pompous in good times don't have their bubbles burst with change. Against either circumstance, the stable person keeps their rational soul invincible, for it's precisely in the good times they prove their strength against adversity. Seneca. The day was busy, as we had trade visitors straight away on the very first day. I guess the trade industry people wanted to make sure that the best products they got to first, and make sure that they were the ones to make a deal to distribute those products for their countries before anyone else had the chance to get them too. Now the equipment hall was very impressive, with new weight training machines, a few new plate loaded machines which had just started becoming very popular after Hammer Strength led the way with their new range of plate loaded products in the early 90s. There was brand new cardio equipment, and the latest ones were brand new to the market then. They were called cross trainers. I mean, they're all over the place now, but they were brand new back then. And as I was over at the cross trainers looking at them, Don Long also came over. Now, we chatted the previous evening at the gym, so we began chatting again, and he said he fancied to go on one of these. Well, I agreed, so we said we'd meet up later in the week and give them a go together. Maybe even use them to get our daily cardio in. Now, Don had placed third in the Night of the Champions the year before with a sensational showing. Big, ripped and with a great shape, and had got himself an Olympia invite. But he turned it down in order to have a really good off-season, in order to make big improvements for the 1997 season, which I think sadly didn't go as well as he had planned, as I don't think he did as well in the 97 season as he did the year before. Still, he looked as big as a house at FIBO with great arms and looked every inch the top professional bodybuilder. Hugely impressive lines and shape. Now, I was keen to spend as much time as I could with him that week. Now, that was easy because he was such a great guy, so easy to get along with. And we got on really well. By the end of the week, we were discussing all sorts of things, with Don asking about the current scene in the UK, what protocols people were using over here. And I remember that he asked me about this new oil that had just hit the market. It was called something like Pump and Pose or something like that. And I think it had been made in Germany, and it would come to everyone's attention as a German bodybuilder called Manfred Herbel was in all the magazines with 26-inch arms, which were the largest in the world at the time. But most people didn't realize how he got those 26-inch arms. In fact, Manfred was also at the show that week, and I got to see him up close, and his arms were huge, but very smooth and no detail. But he was a great guy. What crazy that FIBO was. I had loads of people, I think, thought I was Manfred Herbel. I guess I must resemble him a bit facially. Everyone was calling me Manfred, but my arms certainly weren't in his league. But it shocked me how many people, when they asked for my autograph, called me Manfred. I just smiled and carried on signing my name, and I guess they must have got a bit shocked when they looked down and thought, well, who's this guy, Paul Baxendale? At the end of the day, we all got together, we all went for a meal, and then back to the hotel, where I got changed into my gym clothes. Obviously, I wanted to go to the gym again. I told Andy I was going to the gym and to go and see Don and have a chat, so I'd be away all evening. Now, he had his own plans. I thought he would. So we said we'd see each other maybe later on in the evening, or if not, I was going to be asleep and I'd see him later on in the morning. So I don't think I spent more than an hour's waking time with him the entire week, apart from the drive there and the drive back. He was very busy as the UK distributor, and his job entailed a different schedule to mine. So I remember what a really nice guy was, and that he really liked to party. I decided to go to the same gym again as I had the previous evening, as it was full of great athletes, and we were all using from the expo. As the gym owner already knew me, I knew it was going to be easy to get in and have a workout, and maybe I'd get a chance to chat with Don again, and maybe some other pros later on after my workout. Now, there was only a couple of athletes when I first arrived in the gym who I didn't recognize, as it was still quite early. So I got my training out of the way. I trained hard and quick, heavy duty as usual, using the opportunity of using a couple of new machines in the gym that I hadn't used before. Now, I'm pretty sure I trained shoulders and triceps that night, as that was always the next workout after back, and it was always a very quick one. Shoulders and triceps were dusted in 45 minutes, 50 minutes tops. And as I was finishing, in walked in Don along with one of his friends, and they began their workout too. So I decided to wait for them to finish, and as I was waiting, in came in more and more very big men and women from the show, but again I didn't recognize any of them. There was one other big gym near the expo where I think the rest of the athletes were training, but since I knew where this one was, and it meant I got the chance to hang out with Don most days of the week, then I stayed in that same gym all week. Now, when Don had finished training, we sat around, we chatted for a while again, and then we went for something to eat. Neither of us wanted to stay out late, as the show was only just starting, so we all headed back to the hotel, and then I went back to my room, and as I walked in, Andy said that a few of the team were having drinks in the bar later on, and did I want to come along? I declined, as I needed my sleep, and tomorrow was going to be a long, busy day, and I didn't want to be tired for it. It's hard for me to explain to you right now just how big FIBO was back then. It was the biggest bodybuilding expo in the world, and due to it being in Europe, it meant that all of the bodybuilding and fitness fans from all the European countries always made an effort to go to it. I couldn't even begin to guess or estimate the number of people that passed through the hall where we were based that week, but it must have been hundreds of thousands for sure. The next few days were pretty much the same until the Friday, when the expo opened to the general public. Wow, what a difference that made. It was absolutely manic, rammed to the brim, thousands upon thousands of people walking around, meeting their favorite athletes, watching the shows on the main stage. I was busy having my photo taking, signing autographs, handing out leaflets and brochures to people, but what they really wanted to do was to talk to you about bodybuilding, maybe questions about training or diet, nutrition, or maybe even contest prep. You know what? But no one was there to talk about gear, which whenever I've done seminars, it's always the question that gets asked last. And then once it's asked once, there's a flurry of questions about it. It's really funny. It's almost like, who's brave enough to ask about it? And then it's, will he be honest enough to answer me? Or will he give some type of generic answer so as not to commit himself too deeply? So it was a lot of talking all day. And then they normally wanted to get a photo with you, which I thought was really nice. As now, looking back, I wish I'd taken so many more photos of the entire era than I did. You see, no one had phones with cameras back then, and not many people walked around with a camera. So you had to intentionally take a camera with you to take photos. Now, when Dorian was getting his autobiography ready, he asked me if I had any photos of us training together. And I said, no, I didn't ever think of bringing a camera with me to Temple. I thought, A, it would have been disrespectful, and secondly, I didn't think he would have wanted me to. So looking back from today, I think it's great that people now have the ability to take photos whenever they're able and whenever they want to capture magic moments and memories. So much easier than we did back then. So I was very busy all day, right from the morning right the way through to the afternoon. However, I managed to get away for half an hour at one point to see the Weider athletes on stage, and they were phenomenal. Gunter Schlierkamp, who had to stand right by ours. He was incredible. His height and shape really made him stand out. And then Flex came out on stage. Whoa. And then Mike Matarazzo, Vince Taylor, Paul Dillett. And then my old friend from the UK, Charles Claremont. Oh, he was in sensational shape as always. His shape being on a par with Flex Wheeler's in my mind. Then came on Mike O'Hearn, the natural Mr. Universe. Now he came on in great condition and his size was remarkable considering he was natural. So the ones who really stood out were Flex, obviously, Charles, Paul Dillett, Gunter, Sharon Bruneau and Kim Jezewski. They were all followed by a group of aerobic type dance troupe. So when they came on, I headed back to our stand just to be mobbed by the public again. By now it was kind of getting silly. They were wanting me to pose in a double biceps pose. But I'm sure they were only doing that because they still thought I was Manfred Herbal. Our stand was always busy, but the stand next to us was even busier. It had a line of people going all the way back waiting to see the star, who was Gunter Schlierkamp. Now Gunter was as tall as I am, maybe even taller, but he looked about 50 kilos heavier than me. And his face looked lean. Now I think he kept lean all year. I think he had a modelling contract at the time, so he couldn't let his face get too watery or too puffy. Anyway, later on in the day, I saw a couple walking towards me. Now the guy I didn't recognise at the time, but the lady I certainly did. It was Kim Jezewski with her husband, Chad Nichols. They stopped for a chat and they were both really lovely, really friendly, a joy to meet, a lovely couple. I was a huge Kim fan as I loved the conditioning she brought to the Olympia the year before. And Chad too was a very easy to talk to guy. We spent a while talking, chatting away about bodybuilding, and then they left looking around for the other stands. Now Chad would later become very well known for his work coaching Ronnie Coleman and helping him become the remarkable Mr. Olympia that he was. Now Ronnie will get a few blogs all to himself very shortly. During the day, it was getting difficult to eat. I couldn't eat much, so I began to drink the Champion Nutrition's version of MetRx to ensure my protein intake was high enough. I think the product was called UltraMet, and it was designed around MetRx in terms of the number of grams of protein, carbs and fats. So I knew how much I could drink. And obviously Mike was more than happy for me to drink it all day if I wanted to, because it looked great for the customers to see me drinking the product. But I knew those 23 grams of carbs would have to be taken off either my fat intake or my protein intake total if I was going to go home in the same condition I came out with. Now actually, as it turned out, with the amount of walking that I did, standing around all day and being so active, I actually ended up going home slightly leaner, but I did have a great way of doing cardio one day. Now Don and I had agreed to do cardio on the new cross trainers earlier in the week. So when the public were allowed to enter, we decided to meet up one afternoon and do 40 minutes on the cross trainer, side by side, chatting away as we did so. Well, chatting as well as you can after 20 minutes on a cross trainer, that is. On Thursday night, the parties began to happen in the hotel. It was like party season. Now the public were in, the trade business was all complete. It was kind of like party time. So the first thing I knew about it was from Andy, the guy I was staying with, who told me that the champion team were all having a party later that night, and a few other athletes had been invited from other companies. I'd never been a big partier, but mixing with a group of pro athletes and fitness stars was very appealing. But my little moral stoic compass conscience, whatever it was, kicked in, and I said that I would have to leave it that night as I had to get up early for cardio, which I did. And he couldn't believe this, and he began telling me who was going to be there, and I really would have a good time, as I'd been noticed by quite a few people, by quite a few women actually, around the expo. But I had no time nor desire for that scene, so I went to bed instead. boring, but it was the right thing to do. Plus, getting into those situations can be life destroying. So I knew not to even get in the situation is the best option. Dig deep within yourself, for there is a fountain of goodness ever ready to flow if you will keep digging. Marcus Aurelius. Now Saturday was just the same. It was work for half a day, then mill around the expo, my cardio with Don on the cross trainers, and then back to the stand and to the site, get photographed, represent Champion Nutrition as a very polite, friendly ambassador. Now that was a pleasure to do. Mike and his team had been nothing but wonderful to me all week. So this was the best way I could repay them, by being the professional on the stand that they wanted and needed me to be. Now the Saturday, the stage was crazy. The crowd were literally screaming for the athletes. Now I remember Sean Dinosaur Davis, one of my old heavyweight competitors, or who had been, but he'd won the British overall championships the previous year. So he was now a pro and ready to mix it up with the rest of them. Now Sean went down a storm. He's always monstrously big, huge, and he always put on a great show for the audience at any guest spot that he did, and I saw him in a lot of guest spots. Now Sharon Bruneau was also a fan favourite, and her routine was so well choreographed. And in her red bikini, she had one of the best trained physiques I've ever seen. A tremendous bodybuilder. I was fortunate enough to manage to get behind the stage at one point to see all the stars of the show and the friends that I already knew who were there. Now I spoke with as many people as I possibly could because it was kind of hectic back there, but Sharon Bruneau was so generous enough to give me some of her time. Now she was incredible. Not only did she look amazing, absolutely one of the best female bodybuilders I've ever seen, but she was also so genuinely friendly and a pleasure to meet. Now some of you may be surprised to hear me call her a bodybuilder, but when I started, most of the female bodybuilders were her size. So when I saw her up close and saw the muscle, the shape, the condition, and the femininity all in one package, she truly was a bodybuilder. And I guess if she'd been around a few years earlier, she may have won a few Olympia titles perhaps, but she emerged just as female bodybuilding was just changing slightly and was getting more to a slightly larger, more muscular and more conditioned kind of look on stage, a little bit leaner and more ripped. Now I love Kim Chizevsky physique just as I loved Sharon Bruneau's physique. Different? Yes, but equally impressive in their own unique ways. Now my personal favourite is probably Paula Birkenshaw, for her physique that just seemed light years ahead of the rest of the pack when she arrived on the scene. But also because she is as honest as they come. She trained like an animal. She trained with Billy Payne, one of Dorian's old training partners, to give you an example. Now she is proper old school and tells it exactly as she sees it. But Paula wasn't there. So I can definitely say that Sharon and Kim were the standout women on the stage. Although an American athlete called Debbie Lee was also in fantastic shape, but a very look again to both Sharon and Kim. I guess they'd covered all the different looks that could be attained through weight training and a bodybuilding diet. Now Jean-Pierre Fuchs was just crazy big, but so was Mike Matarazzo. And Roland Zierlock were in pretty lean condition, Mike and Roland, for the expo. Leaner than a lot of the other athletes, so they were probably either deep in prep or they had perhaps completed their prep and had competed a bit earlier on in the year. In fact, all of the Weezer team were just fantastic. And then to my surprise, who walked on stage but Manfred Herbal with his 26-inch guns. And I had to say that yes, he did look a bit like me in his face, but not in his arms, thankfully, because my arms still had split biceps and feathers on my tricep. whereas his were just two huge mounds of biceps and triceps kind of rolled into one. But he was such a good guy though. Afterwards we talked about how I had been mistaken for him all week. And he said that was really strange because he hadn't been mistaken for me at all. A really friendly guy, but whose arms I'm glad I did not have, despite the magazine coverage that it gave him. Oh, a funny thing that I forgot to mention was that when Don Long and I were about to do cardio that day, he said to me, "Why don't we give the crowd something to watch?" He said, "I've got tights on under my baggies." Did I have a pair? I said no. So he went back to his stand and got me a pair to wear. They were striped tights, almost like candy coloured stripes, so quite striking. So we both did our cardio with tights on that day, with people crowded around the cross trainers, watching with wonder or disgust, I'm not quite sure, as our huge quads and hamstrings got pumped up as they worked around the track of the cross trainers, just getting more and more pumped up, the veins starting to come through the tights. It's funny looking back, and I'm sure a lot of people who were there that day can remember seeing two big bodybuilders doing cardio in tights in the hall in front of everybody. Well, it wasn't like we were naked or anything. Now, the fitness girls were on stage in tiny pieces of fabric tied together with strings, so I think we were safe from that type of criticism. It was just an unusual sight to behold for most people, but one that they seemed to really enjoy, as when we got off, we were greeted afterwards with crowds of fans all around us wanting photos and autographs again. Fortune falls heavily on those for whom she's unexpected. The one always on the lookout easily endures. Again, Seneca. Now that night, there were parties everywhere. I was invited to the Weeder party. The champion team were all getting together, but then they were going on somewhere else. They were going to meet a few other groups to a really big do somewhere else. And Andy had arranged to go with them, obviously. It was the last night of big parties because Sunday night would be much more subdued as everybody was getting to get ready to go home to wherever they called home. Honestly, there'd been parties going on nearly every night of that week somewhere. Obviously, my boring lifestyle was no match for these party-loving athletes from all over. But my training had been done for the week. Now my legs had been truly massacred in the gym. And of course I was exhausted after a full week being the representative of champion, meeting and talking all day from morning to night and everything that went with it. Still, I was blessed. What an opportunity I'd been given, and I'd taken full advantage of it. Now, Mike was over the moon with me, and I was so pleased. He even asked about working with me on a full-time basis. So could I not at least celebrate a little bit? Yes, I could have done. But again, I really didn't want to put myself into any situations that would be difficult to get out of. Heck, I had even been invited to a private party with two young fitness ladies from Sweden who I had seen most days and talked to, not thinking anything of it. So it was a bit of a shock to me to get that invitation from them. I'm sure my ego loved it at the time though, although I already had learned how easily allowing your ego to run things can get you knocked to the curb pretty darn quick. And so then I began to see how the industry could degenerate into any other industry where personal and private relationships occur without thought or question. Look, I got it. It was very obvious and very natural. Where you have a group of great-looking men and great-looking women who work hard on their bodies to the point where they catch most people's attention, why wouldn't or shouldn't they have fun while they're young and not so young? And I'd heard about the scene in LA and on the entire bodybuilding circuit, really, to be fair, for this type of thing, for the parties. And although people were really cool about it, as it was no different to what anyone else was doing in any club, in any place, in any country of the world, I also then remembered why I was a bodybuilder and what my goal was. And also that I didn't want to be known as just another of one of the big heavyweight bodybuilders of a reputation with being with multiple girls at multiple events, and then to think that that was any type of normal existence to live by. Now, I had always been against that type of behavior. And just because I'd had a taste of fame and had been flattered and validated by a few beautiful fitness stars and athletes, was I going to change my behavior for one night? No one would ever know, would they? Surely not. I was hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from their ordinary lives, wherever they came from. How satisfying it is to dismiss and block out any upsetting or foreign impression, and immediately to have peace in all things. Marcus Aurelius. No, I knew that I wouldn't go to any party. I knew that I wasn't going to go to the private party of 3 where the 2 lovely fitness women were going to play Twister with me or whatever it was they had in store for me. I knew I was going to go to bed on my own and fall asleep at ease and in peace with myself, and to let the world carry on around me and let them do what they wanted to do. You know, people may have said to me, Paul, you don't live forever. Just go and have some fun. Let loose for the night. Well, I can let loose, and I do let loose. You know, I used to dance all night to 50s bands or the Glenn Miller Orchestra from dusk until dawn. But I had a wife, a baby and a life back home. And although I didn't consciously know it then, I guess I knew somewhere inside of me, I knew I couldn't live 40 or 50 years. The camera's just stopped. The camera's just stopped. I've nearly finished.
It was on 3 bars.
Oh God, no. Bloody hell. Worth it for the risk of that thing. I must have been 50 minutes into it. Oh, I wonder if I can edit it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Because there are a few points where I do stop. I'm trying to think. Where do I take a bit of a break?